All right, folks, well, it's time. I know we've been teasing this for a while, but number one, no, we haven't forgotten about Silver. We haven't left her behind. You got to see her in the past several episodes. And number two, there are some mods that we need to do here, both maintenance in nature and also improvements. So let's just dive right in. I'll show you what we got going on. All right, so this bumper was probably one of the earliest mods that we did on Silver, and performed exceptionally well. This is by Southern Style Off-Road. This is their slimline bumper. They were, in fact, the first people to design this style bumper. There's a lot of copycats out there, but this is the original right here. It's been a great fit. It is a good way to get a winch installed on a mostly stock vehicle early in the game, and it's just paid off big time for us. I love the style, I love the looks, but it's time to move on. We're going to do something a little bit different up here. Same thing back here. This is a Southern Style Off-Road bumper, and not long after I got this and installed this, they actually quit making it. It's a very, very labor-intensive bumper to build, from my understanding, and they actually went away from it, which is sad because I was really looking forward to sharing that video. But again, it's been an awesome bumper. Super heavy though, super heavy. So we're hoping to shed a few pounds with what we'll be replacing it with. And what are we replacing those bumpers with? Well, I'm glad you asked. These bumpers are by AFN, and they're built and manufactured in Portugal. They're just now making their inroads here to the States, and so we're looking forward to giving them a run for their money. Look at this packing job. Have you ever seen bumpers shipped like this? I'm going to use this steel to build something else. That's cool. Awesome job, guys. Oh, and quick little side note, these are action tracks that we've replaced our max tracks with. Just to branch out, test some new things, but of the 6 max tracks that we owned, 5 of them broke under various circumstances, and I don't necessarily blame every one of them on the product. They were pretty extreme situations, but this is a much more pliable plastic, so we're gonna give that a try, see how it goes. If you've been following us for any amount of time, you know that we began with icons on Silver here, and last year upgraded to Kings for the shocks, front and rear. The one thing that we kept though was the upper control arms. Strangely enough, after all those upgrades, the next few trips we kept hearing this loud clanging, and you guys probably know the clips that I'm talking about. Couldn't figure out what in the heck was going on because we had fairly new delta joints on these upper control arms and never even considered that being a problem. It was a problem. So we'll be replacing the upper control arms as well. Next on the list is this bad boy. Actually 2 of these. We're gonna go ahead and replace both of the front CV axles, mostly because the boots are pretty much shot, but I know that this thing's been through the ringer, and so just to do some preventative upgrades, we're gonna go ahead and put some factory units right back in their place because, yeah, it's time. All right, I've got a lot to get done. We've got a lot of things going on behind the scenes, so I'm gonna just jump into this, and there's gonna be a lot of time lapses involved. This isn't gonna be a how-to video, but if I run into any snags, I'll definitely let you know what I did to overcome them. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. the front bumper mostly installed, we pulled the outer shell off just for easy access and hit the pause button while we waited on some fresh headlights to arrive because it was going to be in the way of changing them out. Instead, we headed under the rig to take care of those CV axles. A lot of you folks have asked how we like these STT Pros. Well, they've been exceptional in the traction department. However, they are starting to get quite loud on road. So if your rig is a daily commuter at high speeds and long distances, these might not be the tires for you. But if you want maximum traction and don't care for a little bit of noise, go with these guys. While we don't have time to cover it in this video, these factory skid plates are going to be going away and we're going to be upgrading to something quite a bit more substantial. Now the first step in replacing the front CV axles is to drain the front differential, but you're about to find out how this simple task can go sideways really quickly.
Oh no.
Now it's important to always remove your fill plug before you remove your drain plug, just in case you have to make a run for extra parts. With our fill plug successfully removed, it was time to move to the drain plug, which proved to be a little bit more challenging. Now I have 3 separate impacts in my arsenal, starting with the weakest in the DeWalt battery, to the small compact that we keep in the GX, and then the big dog.
See you on the other side.
Which still wasn't budging this thing. So it was time to move to more creative methods.
Dang it.
Even our good friend Leverage wasn't doing us much good on this one.
Son of a biscuit.
So we brought out the torch. This last resort option is hopefully going to expand that case so that we can extract the plug with just a little bit more impact. I was really hoping I wasn't going to have to go to the next step, which is using a chisel and a sledgehammer. And just as I was getting ready to give up, it finally gave way.
And that's what happens when you get too focused on the task at hand.
And yes, I should have put some cardboard down first, but, you know, you get in a hurry. And this is where oil dry or kitty litter comes in real handy keeping around the shop. After cleaning up my mess, it was time to move on to removing the tie rod end. Now if you don't have one of these removal tools and you plan on working on your suspension, I highly recommend you invest in one. They're not that expensive and save a lot of headache. Now this is where removing the CV axle can sometimes get sideways, but fortunately we'd already greased the splines from a previous removal when we replaced the front bearings. This is one of those moments where present Kevin likes to thank past Kevin for helping him out. Now there are some specialty tools on the market for removing these CV axles, but we find that a nice long pry bar does the job just fine. Just remember to be careful if you plan on reusing your drive shaft, because it's a good chance to bend that dust shield. Now installation should be as simple as aligning the clip on top of the shaft and pushing it in with a little bit of force, but for whatever reason this side was just not working with me. So I had to get creative on keeping that clip in place.
Well, that took far too long. There's a clip that sits on the other side of the drive shaft, and if it's not resting perfectly on top, where when you press it in, only the sides have to move, it spins, and you end up with the whole clip in the way of going into its groove. But the problem is, as soon as you get it inside, the oil gets on that ring and it just spins. It spins even worse than it is out of the box. So I didn't film the whole process. It wasn't kid friendly at all. But what I did come up with is I ended up putting just a little bit of grease in the groove so that the C-clip couldn't roll either direction. It had just enough viscosity in that grease to hold it in place. And then it was so much easier. Man. Now, in case you're wondering, I did grease the splines so that if and when this has to come apart in the future, it's ready. I've been froze up so bad. Alright, now it's time to replace the upper control arm. First, we gotta remove the old one. And it goes a little something like this. Now this whole process goes a lot easier whenever you're trying to remove that long bolt by having an extra set of hands up top so you can take the pressure off the upper control arm itself. Unfortunately, I had to make a lot of trips back and forth to the engine bay, but it finally slid out. Thankfully, again, I had pre-greased that bolt from a few previous removals. And I also want to inspect this guy just to see if there's any crazy wear. There's definitely some worn spots, but not anything that's gouged out. Nothing that would give it room to rattle. Alright, so this is the JBA upper control arm. The reason we're going with these is, well, a couple. Probably one of my favorite things, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but this surface area of this bushing is actually patented and it's tied into the greasing system. So when you put grease into this dirt right here, rather than blowing these bushings out of their housing, it actually lubricates that surface area between the fender washer and the bushing, so you don't end up with that annoying squeak that we all hate. A nice little handy boot on this ball joint to keep the grease from going all over your suspension. Looking forward to giving these a try. Whoa, don't take that. Alright. And then a thin washer. And of course I lubricated that bolt so it's really hard to grab hold of. Moving on to the driver's side CV axle, yeah, it's in a little bit worse shape than the other side. I had let this one go a little bit too long, so it's definitely time to swap it out for something a bit more fresh. Using my little grease trick again, this one slid in without any problem whatsoever. Alright guys, well here we are. This is technically day 2. It's going pretty smooth. The only biggest setback we had was that diff plug. So I've got another one ordered right now, hoping that it gets here in time. Today we're going to actually be removing this rear bumper. Probably going to roll it outside at that point and just pressure wash all those nooks and crannies, give it a good fresh restart, and also get the undercarriage because I got to crawl under there probably later today or first thing tomorrow to swap out the exhaust to something a little bit more entertaining. Got my coffee in me, got breakfast done. Let's get after this. Forgot about that. That would have been a problem. Huh. This won't be a problem in the future. I'll show you what I mean. Now I do like the concept of having these metal nubs
but in practice it makes them really difficult to take on and off. There's only 2 sets with these metal nubs in this set of 4, and I can barely get the Max Track style mounts to close. So in the future I'll probably go to a wing nut style mounting attachment instead of trying to cheat and use the Max Trax mounts. Wasn't what I really had in mind, but that'll work. Sorry guys. I'll keep getting grease all over everything. All right, well, we got all the swing arms off. Everything's disconnected now. I just need to pull this airline loose to this jack going here, and then we'll take all the support bolts apart. Almost there. So sometimes you just have to work smarter, not harder. When I put this on, I have my good friend Mike Taveldi down there in New Mexico help me put this on. Miss you, Mike. So instead we have this engine hoist I have actually now named Mike. Let's see how this goes. Now, if you're new to this channel and you're wondering what that big gray tank is, well, that's our auxiliary fuel tank by Long Range Automotive. While it's certainly not an inexpensive mod, it has been one of our favorite mods because it allows us to go for miles and miles without even thinking about fuel. Let's see how it's gonna act. Reserve here. Love it when a plane comes together. All right, undercarriage is all cleaned up. Now it's time to work on assembling the rear bumper, but before I can put it on, I have to fix something that was modified for the previous bumper. That means welding this little chunk of steel back to where the hitch mounts. So the Southern Style Off-Road bumper that I had was called their high clearance version, and what it did is it actually put that 2-inch receiver up into this frame member here. So you had to cut out enough space for it to fit. Thankfully, I saved it so I can weld this right back into place, gain that strength back. And yeah, it's coming along. Almost there. Well, not almost there, but it's coming along.
Not the prettiest, but she'll hold. Alright, so I've sanded down all these areas that are going to be behind the bumper for a couple of reasons. One, starting to see some rust come through, just some specks here and there, especially on the frame. So I just gave it all a good sanding, knocked off all the rust, and I'm going to paint everything under here flat black so that when you look at the truck, you're not seeing glimpses of silver in the crevices or in the gaps on the bumpers. It'll just make for a lot cleaner look in the long run, and hopefully hold off the whole rust concerns for another couple of years. But I can definitely see somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years, complete disassemble, complete patch job on every little thing that needs help, and then fresh paint job. Plan on keeping this one in the family.
After about 4.5 years, our Xenon Depot LEDs have finally given up the ghost in one of our headlights. So, with a whole new look for Silver coming, we decided to treat her to something that complemented the new look. So we splurged and installed these brand new Mirimoto headlights. We were extremely impressed with the 7-inch Mirimotos that we installed on our Land Cruiser, so we're looking forward to seeing how these do on the 4Runner as well. All right, well, we're back after it after probably about a week-long hiatus while we've been traveling and filming some episodes. Mostly because while I was patting myself on the back that I kept the factory rear bumper, I, however, failed to retain all the proper clips to reattach it to the body. So I had to wait for those to come in, and then I shared some photos on Instagram, and 4Cam Engineering messaged us and said, hey, while I get your bumpers off, you should look at upgrading your cabin pressure vents. I think that's what they're called. So these little guys, I'll show you some B-roll here. The factory ones are just little flaps. And the idea is that when you slam the door, it gives the cabin a way to depressurize so the door doesn't just bounce or not shut all the way. But what happens is over time, those things dry out, dry rot, fall off, and you end up with a situation like we showed with the GX here a while back, where that rear AC unit was just sucking straight dust in and blowing it into the rig. So yeah, thank you guys so much for sending these for the 4Runner. We're gonna try them out. We've already put some on the GX and it fixed the issue, so super glad to have these. Tonight, I'm just trying to get a few things done. Been a long day of editing today, but I wanted to get out here and see if all these clips and stuff are gonna work the way that I intended, so I don't have to order something else. But let's get these guys installed and the final clips for the bumper, and then hopefully we can get after installing the big guy, the big dog, the rear bumper. All right, so these have vents on the back and drain holes in the bottom. So there is a right and a left. You want to have a vent facing the rear of the vehicle. Boom, done. Perfect. That's weird looking. We got the factory bumper on, and now it's time to trim this to fit the new steel bumper. And as is the case with most bumper manufacturers, the instructions on this process are a little bit vague. I really would love to see a template that you could lay out, but that's not what we have to go with here. The good news is, though, from what I can gather, all we need to do is cut this basic body line, or at least near to it. So what I'm going to do is actually leave probably about a 1/2 inch of extra material on this side of the body line, so that we can mate it up, get an idea of how that's going to work, so we don't end up with some kind of crazy gap in there that we weren't expecting.
So I just got off the phone with Rory, who is the guy running AFN USA, and got some more details on the best body lines to follow. So I'm just gonna kind of give myself a little bit more guide here and stay off of this line, but then I am going to continue straight into this other one. I'll use this tape as a guide though, because that line is a little bit faint.
All right, well, pretty much finished mounting the bumper last night, just tidying up a few things this morning, the license plate, getting the wiring routed for the light, and now we're going to crawl underneath and hook up these extra bumper lights because the spare tire does cover up part of this tail light here, so that's the intent of the extra lights below. Similar to what we did on the Kmart on the GX as well. So this has been by far the easiest bumper install to date. And that's saying a lot because these things can be really, really frustrating. I did make one mistake, however, and the instructions weren't really clear, and honestly, I probably should have paid more attention. But I didn't leave enough lip on where it contacts here on the threshold, so a little bit bummed about that. But I'm going to be ordering some ABS plastic to make some custom fender liners, just like I did on the Beast. So when I do that, I'll make a piece to kind of bridge that gap and clean it up a little bit. So disaster will be averted, but still kind of ticks you off when you do something like that. So, all right, well, let's get this thing wired up.
finally, the moment we've all been waiting for, that beautiful, gorgeous front bumper. Just remember, if you decide to swap out your front bumper, if you're going to do any headlight upgrades, you want to do it first because there are bolts that you can't access with the steel bumpers installed. I really like the concept of having a shell that can be removed from its primary mount. It's going to make servicing things in the future a little bit easier. One of the biggest pieces of advice that we can give you if you're installing your own bumper is to make sure that you leave all of the mounting bolts just loose enough that you can slide it around and get that perfect alignment before tightening it down. Oh, and don't forget to Loctite things because the rattling will eventually work these things loose. With the shell installed, it was time to put the deflectors in. Now these took a little bit of finesse to get them installed just right, but with a couple of alignment tools, we got it installed and looking great. One last final trim, and we were almost there. I don't know what to say. I'm kind of speechless. Silver has definitely completely changed their entire look, and we're looking forward to testing these new bumpers and all the other little upgrades that we've done. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Follow along. Can't wait to get this thing out on the trail and see what these mods have done for it. Now, as you probably know, silver holds a special place in our heart. Really our first rig. Bought her brand new back in 2014. 186,000 miles of hard usage, mostly towing, a lot of off-road, probably 60% of that was off-road use. And she just keeps taking what we dish out. So it's really exciting, maybe even a little bit emotional to see her with her new running gear. So really excited. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you on the next one.